Hey, thanks, Ancha. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Fregley, and I am a Principal Solution Architect for AI and Machine Learning at AWS. And today, in this part of the talk, I'm going to walk through some of the code. On the left, we have the winners and some of the submissions for this hackathon. And I'll step through some of the code repos, and then I'll show a quick overview of the Amazon SageMaker Studio Lab that was used to submit these projects. And I've actually sort of analyzed the top winning solutions and extracted out some of the patterns that I saw and some of the data sets that were being used and some of the file formats. And so I'll quickly start with a brief overview of the top winners, and then I'll step into how to actually use SageMaker Studio, and we'll talk about GPUs and some pretty interesting stuff here. So let's start by making this window a bit bigger. This was the response hackathon, disaster response hackathon used by SageMaker Studio Lab. So let's get to, this was the third place submission. And this is a really, really cool project where the team is using computer vision to analyze any hazard fuels that could lead to these wildfires. And so looking at diseased trees, the estimated mortality, and so really cool stuff. So let's jump over to the GitHub repo. And you'll see in these repos, there's this Open Studio Lab, open this project with Studio Lab. If you click that, that'll actually open it. I'm gonna hold off on that for a sec because I just wanna show a quick overview here. We do have a section that is going to go into more detail from the actual teams themselves. And so, I'll let you watch those here in a bit, but just know that we're, dealing with ImageNet, data sets. We're looking at data sets from the Forest Service. There's something called the Insect and Disease Detection Survey, IDS. And these are all open data sources that are on the AWS Open Data Registry. And so I'll show you how to get to that here in a bit as well. Okay. So that's the GitHub project and goes into much more detail here. If you step into some of this code, you could reproduce this code again by going into the free Studio Lab environment. Second place winner, the thunderstorm prediction. This was really cool. This is actually finding correlations between atmospheric conditions and then trying to predict when there's going to be lightning strikes and where these could occur, and also thunderstorms as well. And so that's the submission. Here's the actual code behind it here. And again, you see the open in Studio Lab. Talking about sort of the problem inspiration here about lightning, how this, can potentially kill 24,000 lives per year, 240,000 people injured because of thunder and lightning, specifically lightning. So pretty cool stuff here. This is really the high-level summary. We will dive more into this in a bit, but this is the GitHub repo. If you want to reproduce this, click into Open Studio Lab here. First place winner, this is a project called Deja Vu maybe, is a disaster response solution. So this actually helps with the response portion of these disasters, okay? And so the first two were more sort of mitigation prediction, and this one really dealt with how do we respond once these things happen, okay? So that's the submission. Here's the actual code here, and I believe this project actually also comes with a slick demo that you can run and, has a nice UI. Actually, I think 2 or 3 of these submissions actually have a nice UI. That's kind of fun to go through. But again, we'll show more about these projects in a different segment of this talk. Okay, so if you want to reproduce any of these, you can certainly go and click Open Studio Lab here. But the idea is to really see, where is there damage, and potentially, help people figure out how to get out of here. where to flee, which roads are not damaged. So, pretty cool stuff here. Okay. There was a best technical implementation and functionality. So there was an honorary award here, and this goes to Global Fire Spread Prediction System. So this is a team at a place called Satellite View that is using their knowledge of wildfires, satellite imagery, machine learning to help detect, fire spread, and how can this be applied globally as well. And so this was a really, really cool implementation, a lot of good analysis in here. Let's show you the repo. Now, one thing I'll get to in a bit when we switch over to Studio Lab is there's actually quite a lot of just pretty basic, classical machine learning that we saw being used with a lot of these projects. So, of course, there's going to be computer vision, and of course, there's going to be, pretty advanced data sets, satellite imagery. But at, really the end of the day, there's a lot of just logistic regression and classification and binary classification. And so, pretty, if you're familiar with sort of basic machine learning concepts, these projects are, very, very understandable. Okay, and so this is really trying to predict, based on satellite imagery, and some of the satellite imagery actually can come, within 3 hours or in near real time, and so we'll talk about some of that when we get to the data sets. Let's jump over here to the best solution to the challenge. So this is a group called Soteria. And again, they're using machine learning with satellite imagery to map the sort of current state of these disasters, these natural disasters, to help people respond, to get the emergency vehicles and people on the ground to these different locations. So really, really cool project. A really great use of machine learning, and we'll dive deeper into that solution. Here's the GitHub repo. And let's jump over. Okay, so assuming, and I've kind of done this behind the scenes just to speed things up a little bit, but if I bounce over to here and make this screen a little bigger, I've got, let's see, 7 notebooks here, and I'll try to get to as many as possible given time. There were some very interesting findings. For example, clouds. Clouds from these satellite images can really cause problems, and they're often interpreted as buildings. Okay, so let's see, file formats and data sets. There's this GeoJSON file format that is pretty cool. So it's a specification that gives you support for these multi-polygons. You can also then give all kinds of different custom properties. And so, this is different regions, different, let's see, there's, freeform notes, there's observation counts, the way that this data was collected, and basically a whole ton of parameters that you can load in. And what we'll do later, I'll show GeoPandas where you can actually access this data and manipulate it just like a regular pandas data frame called a GeoPandas data frame, geodata frame. Okay, and then here's the typical multi-polygon. So we have the coordinates, and this really defines those edges for that polygon. There's also something called GeoTIFF format, and really this embeds spatial information. So these are just like regular TIFFs, but they actually have spatial coordinates and the cell size of these raster images, and they will also include the coordinate reference system, which is very important because when you're trying to compare and do operations on these GeoTIFF images, you really need to know what is the reference coordinate, or the coordinate reference system, because you have to match those coordinate reference systems when you're joining different images or trying to create larger dimensional spaces out of lower dimensional TIFFs. There's one other format pretty cool called Cloud Optimized GeoTIFF. I believe Amazon was actually part of this many years ago. And this is a way to, if you have very large files, you can actually stream them when you're doing your like analysis or doing machine learning, so that you don't actually have to download the whole file up front, but you can stream it. And the technical details here are that these cloud optimized GeoTIFFs do support HTTP GET range requests, and really helps speed up some of the analysis. One link I'm going to open up here, and I do have links in here. I'll also share a link where all of this is, this code, but there is the AWS Open Data Registry. Now this is pretty cool, and we've actually provided a tag here with disaster response, and here's your Landsat data sets. So these are open data sets that you can use. These are stored in S3 buckets. Okay, some of the cool libraries we saw, GeoPandas. This is a pretty cool, so it implements GeoSeries and GeoDataFrame, which are subclasses of the classic Pandas series and Pandas data frame. This really lets us work with geodata just like we would work with regular tabular data. So very, very cool project. There's a library called EarthPy, and it's devoted to working specifically with these sort of spatial images, GeoTIFFs, and like vector data, and yeah, so really lets us. And yes, actually EarthPy and then Raster.io are used together to load in these GeoTIFFs, right? Which are, they are not just regular images, but they have the image, but they also have a lot of this other spatial, coordinates that are embedded within. And Raster.io gives us a Python API that really lets us deal with these GeoTIFFs using, sort of NumPy, like n-dimensional arrays. I mentioned there was a lot of classical machine learning, a whole ton. Scikit-learn was used everywhere. It's not specific to this domain, but it certainly does come up in pretty much every machine learning project that I am part of. And so some of the popular models that we saw being used were, k-nearest neighbor, principal component analysis, SVD, TSNE, binary classification, multi-class classification, logistic regression, decision trees, and random forest. Very, very popular. Got very, very good results with these simple like algorithms. This specific notebook I'm showing here is more generic and not specific to any of the winners, but it's showing the fundamentals of how each of those winners has gone about this. Of course, using GPUs, using GeoPandas, things like that. So this is a weather image classification. So these are images of different weather conditions, and we want to classify them into one of four categories: cloudy, rain, shine, or sunrise. Okay, not quite sure how they got these four or why these were significant, but that's the data set that we chose here. And one thing to point out, if you use a GPU, this takes 25 seconds. This is using PyTorch and something called Torch Vision. So computer vision with PyTorch. If you use a GPU, it takes 25 seconds. When I was first doing this and I was only using a CPU, I was not using GPU, this actually took 8 minutes. And so this is almost 20 times speed up to use these GPUs. And yes, the GPU does cost more, although it's free within SageMaker Studio Lab. When you can do this 20 times faster, you can get the answer quicker, you can iterate faster, and the summary here is always use GPU if you can. Here's a traditional Pandas data frame. The point here is to show GeoPandas data frame. We can convert that regular Pandas data frame into a GeoPandas data frame by just wrapping it here and then giving some extra information about the geometry. And now there's another column here added, and so this is pretty cool. When you plot a GeoPandas data frame, it'll actually show you, which continents. South America, here we've plotted different cities, and countries within South America, and it actually shows up on a plot like this, okay? So pretty cool stuff. Saw this being used very heavily, throughout all these projects. Something is, or that is very unique to this type of geo analysis. Next one, EarthPy. And so like I said, EarthPy and Raster.io, these are used to load in GeoTIFFs. So you'll see the TIFF extension. This is actually a GeoTIFF, which has the extra data in it for the spatial coordinates. Okay, and here is so DEM, again, is a digital elevation model. There's also this concept called a hillshade, which is a 3D representation to sort of, add a little bit more three-dimensional and visually interesting aspects. So this is without the hillshade. Now this is using EarthPy, by the way. That's what EP is. And now we're going to add the hillshade. So this is the actual elevation with some nice shading here. We see, cities over here. We see some of this type of like elevation for these hills. And now we can actually combine the two, where we combine the elevation model, the color model, with the grayscale hillshade, and now we see a very, very interesting and fun way to analyze this data. Okay, and let's see. Let me go to the next one, California lakes. So living in California, I enjoy learning more and more about the state that I live in but did not grow up in. So I like this data set quite a bit. What we're going to do here is we're once again going to use GeoPandas. We're going to plot and find some of these specific lakes and within certain counties. So pardon the scroll, but I'm going to get to the visually interesting stuff here. So here we're just plotting the counties within California, okay? And I live in San Francisco County, so way up there. And let's see, let me keep going here. Once again, apologize for the scroll trying to get through. Okay, here's the lakes. So we have two separate, so up above I had shown counties. Here I'm showing the lakes. Okay, and this is using GeoPandas, and this is plotting. Is this using? Yeah. Okay, and then I had mentioned before that we have to be careful with the CRS, Coordinate Reference System, because when we try to combine these different images and these different shapes, the Coordinate Reference System has to match. If it doesn't match, things won't look good. And so we see one of them has slightly different CRS. So the counties and the lakes data have a different CRS. So we need to project. In this case, we're choosing to project the lake data into the county data. And now they're both in the same CRS projection. We can overlay and then visualize. So this is a combined way to look at the counties and the lakes. And so again, I'm showing these as fundamental building blocks that we saw in a lot of our submissions, doing things like this with road data. Okay, and here we're specifically here looking at Lake Shasta, pretty cool lake that I don't know too much about, but I learned more from this notebook, and here we can actually plot what it looks like. So pretty cool. These are typical plots that we usually do with pandas and matplotlib. All right, one last data set. This is really more about atmospheric. So this is NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And this actually comes from, on the East Coast, a town called Asheville, North Carolina. Very, very cool town. I've heard it's very similar to Boulder, Colorado, San Francisco, kind of a sort of hippie-ish town, which I'm always into. I like that kind of stuff. Here's the actual data set. So we see soil temperature, soil moisture, surface temperature, a lot of cool things. Here's the units that are being used. Everything is Celsius. And what are we using here? We're using pretty standard things here. So matplotlib. So a lot of, okay, here's the data prep. I'm just gonna get through this quick. This is really a pretty standard, tabular data type of notebook. It's just analyzing tabular data. So looking at, mins, averages, describing these data frames, telling us what the types are. And so not so much geo-specific visualizations here, but more your typical tabular data. But let me get to the interesting stuff here. So here we can very quickly look at these histograms. So we see, what is the makeup of our data for each of those data points, where, on the y-axis here, of course, is the count of the number of times that we see longitude at negative 82.5. Again, this is a single town within the US just to keep the data manageable. So we see the same longitude, the same latitude for all 1,000 plus rows. And then we can see the maximum temperature, surface temperature, and let's see, soil temperature, humidity. Here we're just trying to look at how many rainy days are there? Just 1 sec, let me get to that. Right, so here we have added a new column based on a new fields that we're calling rain labels. So up above, I kind of skipped through it, but we created a new column that has really, thresholds. If there was no rain, if there was 1 day of rain, 10 days of rain, 20, represent different. So this looks like a pretty rain-free town, and maybe a town I need to, potentially move to because I don't really like rain. I like sunshine. And we can look at some, fun box plots here. Let's keep going though. This is a fun grid. This is really comparing solar energy, the radiance with the average air temperature. We see there is not much correlation actually. So we do notice little correlation between these variables, but let's take a look at the overall coordination between the other variables here. So probably thought there has to be some kind of pair plot in here, and there sure is. So here we see, daily average. Apologize if this is too small, but we can very quickly see what's correlated, what's not correlated, and we can dive deeper into this. Wet is blue, dry is red. Okay, and you can take a look at all of this in the GitHub repo. And here's just number of dry and wet days per month. So here's 1 through 12, January through December, number of dry and wet. Air temperature is seasonal. So this is from January 2017. It's a little chillier. This is Celsius going up to pretty hot, chilly, hot. So this is what we expect. This is a seasonal, four-season type of city in the US. And let's dive deeper into looking at, average, max, min. There's another one here showing by month. So this is, month 1 through month 12. This shows us that, in the middle months, June, July, the maximum temperature is much higher, average temperature. So again, this is showing within a single year, across those 3 years aggregated, we do see expected patterns here. Last one would be kind of a temperature heat map. And we see, of course, in the middle months, we do see warmer. This is the air temperature based on month, and then this is sort of rainy. This is precipitation, right? And then the last one is humidity. So it looks like sort of year-round things are, pretty humid, even when it's not raining. And, having been near Asheville, I've never actually been there, but in towns nearby, I certainly know that humidity. So, just to summarize here, we've got this Registry of the Open Data on AWS where you can find a lot of these data sets. There's many more than the 44 here. We just, in this URL, we have it split out for disaster response. There's actually, 300 plus data sets that are pretty cool. And here is the actual data, or the GitHub repo. This is my and Ansha's repo for the book that we wrote. So check that out. You can find these samples in here. And I think that's it. Ansha, back to you.